Well, hello, friends. Today is the one day I have at home before I leave again. I was just on a vacation and it was fantastic. It was wonderful. But I'm here for a day and then I'm off again. So I'm recording some videos and it's going to be awesome. I just wanted to give a super brief update before we jump into this video of what my schedule is going to look like over the next couple of months, because when I started this year, I really wanted to do as little travel as possible. Then fast forward to summer, and I'm gone for the entirety of July, and then most of June and some of August. So not the zero travel that I was hoping for, but all good things. All of the trips are important and they're good. So I'm going to be recording from some different places instead of here in my wonderful office. And I hope that we won't have any disruption in videos, but we're going to just have to play it by ear, right? We're going to have to see. But that's not why you're here. You're here to learn about avoiding distractions. One of the most important pieces of a writing career is making writing a habit, habitually sitting down and putting your thoughts onto paper, putting your thoughts onto your Word document, however you write, and doing it in a consistent way. The only way we make progress is by actually doing, right? And at the end of the day, the most effective way to get something done is to just start it and then continue it and then eventually finish it. And most people are sitting at their computers thinking to themselves, thank you, Captain Obvious. But I think it's worth reiterating. The best way to do something is to just do it. Not to think about it, not to plan for it, not to try to come up with strategies. It's just to do it. You know, when you think to yourself, okay, I've got this book I want to write, I've got chapters I want to do, literally the best thing you can do is just say, okay, and then go and sit down and start working. So often we overthink it. So often we allow all of these excuses to filter in and shift our action. But at the end of the day, just doing the thing is the best way to get the thing done. And while that sounds simple, it can be really, really hard. And I think that this is a shared experience, right? We've all been in that situation where we're like, I know exactly what I need to do, and I know how to do it. I just don't want to do it. In the writing world, this is often called the resistance. This concept of resistance, this sort of invisible force that prevents us from sitting down and doing the thing, specifically writing, comes from a book called The War of Art. And I quite enjoyed the book. It's probably worth your time to read it. But it really is a universal experience, that there's this force that seems to want to block us at every turn, right? So on the one hand, you have the Muse, which is this inspirational force that causes writers to write. And on the other hand, you have the resistance. Well, we want to talk about how to push past the resistance and actually sit down and actually write. If you're finding yourself, like I often do, in a position where it seems like you're doing everything but writing, then I want to lay out a really sort of simple framework that you can use to start attacking that problem. And you have to attack it. This isn't something that just goes away. It's not something that you'll eventually, find inspiration or lightning will strike and you'll all of a sudden be super motivated. Sure, that can happen, but if it does, it only happens for a really short amount of time. And then typically you're going to fall back into your old habits of not writing when you should be writing. So what do? Well, we start with what we call an action review. The first and probably most important thing to do is to pause and to actually review what's going on, right? Establish baseline, understand the world, and understand reality. To do this, you're going to sit down and you're just going to say, okay, what's going on? Why am I not writing? What is it that is keeping me from actually completing the task that I want to complete? And, this doesn't have to be writing. It can be anything, really. But you're going to want to take a moment and review. Because so often we just sort of blindly roll through life without actually considering our circumstances. And when you don't consider the reality of your world, what often happens is that you spend all of your time and effort and energy fixing problems that aren't actually the problem, that are not the core thing driving your resistance. So instead of just sort of blindly pushing ahead, taking that moment to reflect, and it doesn't have to be long, like it can be a couple of minutes, or it can be an entire day. Depends on how you want to do it. But taking a moment to genuinely recognize reality is the first step in figuring out how you're going to address this problem. So to give you a super concrete example, this past month, I wanted to write a lot, and I ended up not being able to write a lot, and it was frustrating me to no end. I would find myself starting my workday, and I would get maybe a chapter or 2 chapters in, or maybe even no chapters at all. And I would be so frustrated because it felt like I knew what I needed to write. I know that I'm capable of writing it, but it just wouldn't come, right? The words just wouldn't come. And this went on for a couple of days until finally I said, okay, enough, right? And I did my action review. I sat down and I said, what is going on? Not just what's going on with my writing, right? Why don't I feel like writing? But what's going on in my life that is absorbing all of my attention? What is going on in my life that is absorbing all of my focus? What is going on in my life that has me so distracted? And I very quickly was able to identify the things in my life that were causing those issues. Now, for me, that specifically was the game company and the tariff situation. So I own a board game company with a number of other people, and recently the situation with the tariffs made our continued existence questionable, right? And so for the last 2 months, I've been working through solving that problem, and I got to tell you, it took up all my attention. Now, that wasn't the only thing. There were other things going on. I had some story issues that I was refusing to acknowledge, and then I needed to work out. I had some family stuff going on, and so there were all of these different things, right, that were contributing to me not writing. But in my day-to-day life, I didn't understand what was actually causing the problem, right? I was just sort of blindly continuing to go about my day, to try and write without actually understanding my situation. And so if I hadn't done the action review, I may have just continued on, slamming my head against this metaphoric wall as I tried to push myself to write, but never actually understanding the reason that I was feeling so much resistance. And so after doing my action review, I had this really clear picture of what is going on in my life right now. And more importantly, I understood what I needed to prioritize in order to get my writing back to where it needed to be. Now, the second piece of this framework is understanding your own excuses. Because even though all of those things were going on, even though I had all of these distractions in my life, I also recognized that I make particular excuses. And those particular excuses lead to me not getting the stuff done that I want to get done. And those particular excuses manifest regardless of whether I have a legitimate reason to not be writing or not. For example, one of my particular excuses is I can't concentrate, right? I can't focus. My mind goes a million different places. Anytime there's stuff happening, I get really fractured mentally, and I have a really hard time keeping my mind on any one thing, right? And I'm sure that some of you can relate to that. However, it is an excuse, okay? Regardless of whether, it is a chemical reality or a biological reality, it's also an excuse. Because there have been points in my life where I've been able to focus. I have been able to push past my my challenge in this regard and focus my attention and actually get work done. Just because it's not going to be easy doesn't mean that my excuse has to dictate my reality, right? I feel like I said that terribly, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. Just because my mind works a specific way doesn't mean that I have to just resign myself to living in those circumstances. One of the most wonderful things about being human is that we just get to decide how we want to live. We get to decide to take the hard path. We get to decide to do difficult things. And we can just do them. And one of the consequences of me saying I'm not going to be ruled by my fractured attention span is suffering. It's having a hard time. It's having to push through discomfort. But on the other side of that discomfort is this amazing world where I actually get things done, and I'm able to focus, and I'm able to concentrate, and my mind works for me instead of against me, right? But it takes discomfort to get there, and I don't like discomfort. I don't like suffering. But what I've come to learn over the years is that my excuses, the things that I do so that I don't have to suffer, are genuinely the biggest obstacle to me getting what I want. If I can recognize reality, first of all, through my action review, and then I can recognize where I make excuses because I don't want to suffer, then all of a sudden I have a game plan, or at least the beginnings of one, that are going to help me get what I want. And in my case, it's more writing. Now, once I've done those two things, right, and these are fairly conceptual things, right? An action review, and then a clear recognition of where you're making excuses, and an actual labeling of them, right? You're going to want to write those down as well. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to practice selective procrastination. Now, selective procrastination is a sort of counterintuitive thing, right? We want to procrastinate. We want to procrastinate a lot, but we want to procrastinate selectively. We want to procrastinate on things that are not going to drive us towards our goal. Everything that is not going to drive us towards our goal. Any responsibility you have, procrastinate on it, except the single thing you want to get done. So, imagine with me, we're just going to use a really simple example. Imagine with me we wanted to get the dishes done, but we had an entire list of other stuff that needed to happen, right? We need to do the dishes. We need to sweep the floor. We need to take out the trash. We need to, do the laundry. We need to pick up our living room, right? I have that giant list of chores to do, but the dishes really need to be done. So, if I find myself procrastinating on everything, then all I need to do, the way selective procrastination works, is that I simply procrastinate on everything except for one thing. You say, I'm not going to do the laundry. I'm not going to sweep the floor. I'm not going to take out the trash. I'm not going to pick up my living room, right? I'm going to just push those things off. Now, you'll want to write them down to make sure that you don't forget about them, but we're going to push them off. And then, guess what we're going to do? We're going to force ourselves into a situation where the only thing we can do is the dishes. And then we're going to just do the dishes, right? We're going to say, I am actively procrastinating on everything else I need to do. And what's cool about selective procrastination is that I'll do that later, or I'm not going to do that right now, is actually a really good way to trick yourself into not doing things like picking up your phone, not doing things like going and watching some TV, not doing things like, booting up a video game and playing the video game. When you feel the temptation, right? When you feel that urge to do that, just say to yourself, I'm going to do that in a little bit. I'm going to do that in 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 20 minutes. I'm going to do that a little bit later, right? I want to get on Facebook and look at Facebook. I'm going to do this a little bit later. I'm going to do it, but I'm going to just push it off a little bit. And this methodology, once practiced, is actually super helpful for ordering your day, for ordering the things you're going to do. Now, sometimes it does mean that important stuff gets pushed back. But if you have done an action review, if you understand your excuses, then you should be in the correct frame to be able to prioritize correctly, right? If you understand reality, if you understand this, like the circumstances you're in, and you understand how you normally react to those circumstances, you're going to have a really insightful ability to prioritize your life properly. And so you take the most important thing and you selectively procrastinate on everything else. And you just do that most important thing. And when you're done, you go to the next item on the list and you procrastinate on everything else. And you just tackle each thing one at a time, right? So if for me, to go back to the example I was using, I was in this situation where I had all of this other stuff that was weighing on me. And my resistance to writing was really, really high. So what did I do? I said, okay, I've done my action review. I understand my situation. I have identified where my excuses are, where I tend to give excuses. Now, let me selectively procrastinate on everything else. And so I, left my phone upstairs. I didn't bring it down. I started turning Discord off. I started scheduling, times for meetings and times for doing work that wasn't writing later. And I would just say, you know what? Even though I'm thinking about this now, I'm just going to push it back. I'm going to put a specific time on it, and I'm going to push it into the future, right? I started snoozing my email. Gmail has this cool function where you can make an email disappear from your inbox and reappear later as if you had just gotten it. And I use that aggressively, right? To just try and clear everything away, selectively procrastinating. You might call it even actively procrastinating on all sorts of things so that I could focus on getting as much writing done as possible. Now, did I all of a sudden turn around and get all of my writing done? No, absolutely not. In fact, I wrote a lot less than I wanted to during that period of time. But I did get work done, right? I was able to write, and I was able to do it in a way that didn't drive me insane. It didn't feel like I was banging my head against the wall. Now, part of my action review identified for me that I had specific things that I needed to get done more than I needed to write, right? They took higher priority than writing. Even though in my head it was like writing is always my highest priority, sometimes you just have to deal with things in life. And situations come up where when you actually do an assessment of reality, right? When you actually get a clear view of reality, you realize, no, these other things are more important than me writing. So 2 examples of that for me, finalizing the situation with Zero Strategy Games and the tariffs, making a bunch of decisions about how we were going to move forward there. That took precedence over my writing. And I wish it hadn't, because, writing is incredibly important. that's my career. But figuring those situations out, there were a bunch of other people waiting on those decisions. And so those things needed to be figured out. Those conversations needed to happen. And so that was more important at that time, right? We figured it all out now. And so now I can be back to writing as a higher priority. But another one was that my oldest daughter had an end of the year picnic, and that took up, it ended up taking up the majority of the day, including most of the morning, which is when I normally write. And so I prioritized that because that is more important than me squeezing in another couple hours of writing. And so part of this whole process is understanding that as we do our action review and as we, understand our own excuses, and as we prioritize and use selective procrastination to really focus in on singular tasks at a time, sometimes writing just ends up taking a back seat, and that's okay. It's all right. Yes, this is all about, a framework that we can use in order to get more writing done. But at the end of the day, sometimes you just need to take the time to actually clear the other tasks, to actually move them out of the way so that you can focus on getting your writing done. Anyway, this video has turned out to be a lot longer than I anticipated. I hope you enjoy it. And leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any strategies for beating resistance when it comes to your writing. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and do me a favor, and if you find value in these videos, share it with another writer friend. If you have any writing groups or anything like that, maybe post them in there. I'd love to grow the channel, and personal recommendation is always the best way to do that. I hope you have a good one. I'll see you later.